Democracy supporters here in the middle of Tahrir Square, in the middle of Liberation Square, have been interacting with the army, giving them or trying to hand over people they believe were trying to make trouble. Even when they have food and water, they go up to the soldiers and offer it to them. So there is still a cordial, if not friendly relationship between the people and the military. However, as time goes on and without any clear resolution or guidance or vision to ending this standoff and this violence, that relationship could have the potential to sour, Divya.
Hold on for a second. I'm just going to update our viewers on what they're seeing. We're seeing live pictures from Cairo. We're seeing pictures from Cairo of protesters on the ground. This is Tahrir Square, Liberation Square. These pictures are from just a few minutes ago. The protesters are there after a night of violent clashes. It seems with daybreak has brought some sense or semblance of calm, although the situation is still very charged. Our correspondents are saying that things could turn at any moment. Let's go back to one of our correspondents that we were speaking to there, who is in Liberation Square. Now, the interesting thing is that it is being called a revolution, but a headless one. Is there any clear sign of any emergence of any kind of leadership within these protests?
Indeed, it is one of the double-edged swords to this revolution is the fact that the positive side has come organically and from across the board and across the political spectrum. The negative side is that this lack of clarity and leadership or personality is proving a challenge for the demonstrators to channel their demands or at least negotiate if there were any negotiations. There still isn't any clear leadership because of the variety of people here, but also more so because the government has made it very clear that it does not want to negotiate either ever or unless these demonstrations stop. Obviously, these demonstrators can't guarantee that if they stop the demonstrations, that offer for negotiation will maintain. So when I've been speaking to the protesters here and telling them, don't you find it a problem that there isn't a clear leadership? They say, well, regardless, even if we did have a clear leadership, it wouldn't make a difference because, as you can see, the government has sent its thugs and police to kill us, according to them. So the situation of leadership, I think, for the time being is irrelevant. If you can hear the chants now, Salmiya, Salmiya, peaceful, peaceful, it seems there are a group of pro-democracy supporters who have arrested or apprehended another pro-Mubarak person and are taking him, trying to take him to one of the soldiers there. So the situation here isn't necessarily, or at least for today, will not be necessarily about the leadership of opposition or not, because the opposition groups, the main opposition groups in Egypt came out just yesterday before the violence and after Mubarak had spoken the night before and said that they are willing to sit down and discuss and whatever, but then everything turned violent. So today the focus will be on how to prevent more escalation and violence, more deaths, more injuries, and people are now looking to mobilize for Friday. One of the people I've been speaking to here in Liberation Square told me that possibly yesterday's battle was a blessing in disguise for them, because now maybe people may not end up gathering in Tahrir on Friday in Liberation Square as people wanted. Now they may actually go and gather directly at the presidential palace. Now, obviously, if that happens, the presidential palace is on a main street, on a wide street. It's not in the middle of a square. There is no square overlooking it or in front of it, and that could pose even more of a challenge to the military and the presidential guard, in fact, Divya.
It seems the only certain thing about this situation is the uncertainty. Thank you very much. We'll, of course, be speaking to you later for more updates. That's our correspondent who is in Tahrir Square, which is what you're looking at, where protesters are still gathering. Now, until Wednesday, the anti-government demonstrations had been relatively peaceful, but all that changed as pro-Mubarak supporters tried to get into Cairo's Liberation Square. Alan Fisher has this report.
Building barricades, preparing for the battle they believe is to come. The anti-Mubarak protesters insist they're not leaving the square until the president leaves office. Throughout the night, the running battles between the two sides continued. Gunfire could be heard in various parts of the city centre. Cars were burnt out, petrol bombs thrown. the injured dragged away. Speaking to Al Jazeera, one anti-Mubarak protester described the events of the night.
We have many injured people. It will be very hard to move them. And we know, everyone in the square knows, if we decided to give in now, they will hunt us one by one. We've been through this. We know it. They are shooting. There are people, there are some of the thugs with rifles on the bridge, and they shot at our demonstrators. Like the latest of our dead protesters, he was shot right through the head. I had two friends watching this happen.
The trouble erupted on Wednesday when pro-government supporters were allowed to enter the square, where those calling for President Mubarak's departure had gathered. The exchanges quickly grew from chants and insults to something much more serious, more violent. Egyptian soldiers have been rarely seen. The army is now facing international criticism for not doing something to stop the violence. Its actions in the coming hours will go a long way to deciding how this battle for Egypt will end. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera.
That was what was happening. This is the view right now. You're looking at Liberation Square, where protesters are gathering. People are milling about after a night of violence. Let's now go to one of our correspondents who is in Cairo. When we were speaking to you earlier, you said that things seem to be moving. There seemed to be some movement. Can you update us?
Well, I think it's a growing number from Mubarak. They are setting on the end of the bridge. They've been moved back by the army. In the last half an hour or so, NGOs were calling on the army to intervene. They've got to stop this from happening. We are starting to get a sense now that there is a movement to prevent what happened yesterday from happening again today. The soldiers have pushed back the supporters, the pro-government supporters, pro-regime supporters, away from the anti-government demonstrators who've quite effectively taken over the square. We are also hearing, and this is not confirmed yet, that the Prime Minister, the newly elected Prime Minister, threatened to resign. He said that he didn't know that this was going to happen yesterday. It really is a feeling that whatever gains the president made after his rather emotional speech on Tuesday, when he said that, look, he's not going to step down yet, but he will in September. He'll put all the concessions through that the protesters have been demanding. Whatever sympathy he was able to garner then has been all but wiped out. Egyptians are saying this picture that you are seeing is not new. Certainly the numbers clearly are new, but this picture of repression by state security forces is nothing new. The fact that the regime, when it wants to make a point, will send in its thugs. It often happens over elections. This is the picture that many Egyptians are saying, look, see, this is what happens to us now. They clearly are not now going to go away. It seems that the popularity is back in their court now. The tipping point as far as the regime was concerned was possibly that heavy-handed action that was taken yesterday.
Stay with me there. I'm just going to update our viewers on what they're looking at. This is one of the entrances to Liberation Square. As you can see, there's this tank station there. The army has been stationed and has tanks around the square. They have been there mostly. They haven't intervened. In fact, this is one of the entrances where the pro-Mubarak supporters went through and clashed with the anti-government protesters. The tanks apparently were there. They had just stayed aside as the pro-Mubarak supporters broke into the square from this entrance and clashed with the anti-government protesters. So you're looking at one of the entrances to Liberation Square, and as you can see that the army is there. There's a tank standing by. These tanks we're hearing have been moving, but not much else. Let's go back to our correspondent now. Can you tell us what you're hearing about the protest? Does it seem like this is still going to pick up?
Well, that's the way we saw this way. The two sides facing each other off. We've seen a lot of Molotov cocktails, particularly from the pro-regime camp, being lobbed towards the demonstrators. Everybody felt that the big demonstrations, the next ones were going to happen after prayers on Friday. Clearly this has been moved forward, some sort of game plan by the regime that clearly the Prime Minister doesn't know about. Not sure at this stage, of course, how it's going to play out. Those anti-government demonstrators are there to say. It will be interesting to see if the regime sets up its strategy more so what we're going to actually do to prevent both sides from reaching each other. What we are hearing as well is this kind of this PR campaign that is underway by the government, the publicity regime. We saw an interview with an anti-government demonstrator, and she claimed that she's been trained by the Israelis to cause dissent within the government. This is clearly something that the government would like to play on, within these demonstrations. So you can see that the government's trying to paint a picture of these anti-government demonstrators as people who are just out to cause anarchy on the streets. And in some quarters, it is working. Those who are just watching state-sponsored TV believe that that's what's happening, that the pro-government supporters want to return the country to some sort of normality, but there are these troublemakers out on the streets who don't want that to happen.
I'd like to apologize for the quality of the audio. As you know, phone signals in Egypt are being intermittently interrupted, and phone and internet and much of the communication has been unreliable, but we are trying to get the messages across with our correspondents who are based across Cairo. We're speaking to one of our correspondents right now. I'd like to ask you whether there has been any kind of response from any kind of leader, be it government or opposition leader, as the day breaks today.
It's really hard to break, and I don't know what's behind that. But you were talking, I heard a little bit about internet. The internet, in fact, has been down over most of the week. And you also spoke about response, international response. I think I heard you say, well, this recent action has, well, garnered the greatest, the heaviest response from the U.S. It certainly seems that their dialogue is changing. As the dialogue in the street now changes, it's certainly gone from peaceful conversation to a sort of war type of conversation. And how that's going to play out, we're not sure. Hello?
I apologize again for the quality of that audio. We seem to have lost a correspondent. We'll, of course, be trying to get in touch with all of them who are stationed in and around Cairo, who will be updating us on the situation as it happens. You're now looking at live pictures from Cairo. As you can see there, that is one of the entrances to Liberation Square. There is a tank stationed outside. Now, these tanks are ringing the square. They're there for security. They have not intervened in any of the clashes. This particular entrance has been one where the pro-Mubarak supporters have broken through, and that is what sparked much of the clashes that we have seen yesterday and overnight. Now, let me give you a reminder of the latest developments on our top story. This is the battle for Egypt. It has entered its 10th day. Gunshots have been fired and petrol bombs thrown in Cairo's Liberation Square. Egypt's health minister has confirmed that 5 people have been killed and more than 800 injured after a night of violence. Doctors in the ground in Tahrir Square put the figure at 7 dead. Well, the army moves in to detain protesters. Eyewitnesses have accused soldiers of failing to intervene, even as the clashes turned violent. Now, despite the deadly clashes, pro-democracy supporters tell Al Jazeera that they intend to stand their ground. Well, there are those that have not taken to the protest. There are parts of Cairo which are certainly very dangerous at the moment, and many foreigners are getting out as quickly as they can. Even Iraqis are heading back to Baghdad for safety. Jane Arif reports now on the exodus.
It's not the way they would have liked to have returned, but these Iraqis